My name is Susan Kahlo, and I am here at the Veterans History Project in the Library of Congress. Today's date is December 2nd, 2021, and I will be interviewing Earl Porter III. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I'm going to take this. We're meeting for the first time, and it's my first time here as well.
Yeah.
And so it's an honor to meet with you, and I'm going to start it up right now that you've been doing. We will talk about where did you come. Right now we're in the Washington D.C. You've just come off, taken a break from the Appalachian Trail.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I just want that for where we're starting out. We'll continue this later, but for right now, thank you for taking time to come off the trail.
No problem.
For this, and I will turn it over for you to please state your name and also spell your name for me for the record.
My name's Earl Porter III. You spell that EARL PORTER.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm very fortunate to be here with you guys. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the tour. I did not expect to have a tour, but that was awesome.
Yeah, I guess I should. And so, also just, I want to set the stage for just kind of your background. If you could tell me when you were born, where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in 1987.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 34 years old. I was born in Tucker, Georgia, I think at the Tucker Hospital, but I grew up in Decatur, Georgia, which is just a neighboring town.
Okay. Was there anybody else in your family, your parents, that were in the military?
My dad was drafted into Vietnam, and he did, I think, 3 years of service as a transportation, enlisted man of transportation. So 88 Mike, I think, would have been his nomenclature, MOS.
Yeah.
My mother was not in the military, and yeah, I was born into a household with both parents, and they were eventually divorced, I think when I was 2 years old. And my sister, who's 10 years older than me, was living with me up until I was about 4 years old. And we grew up right in a neighborhood called Oakhurst, in Decatur.
Oh, cool. Okay. Alrighty. So that was, so give me a little bit about what was going on in your life that led you
to the military.
Yeah, or just a...
I don't think I had any clear intention to join the military until, or even a concept that it could be a possibility until maybe 14 or 15. So I was attending, Renfro Middle School in Decatur, and I was participating in a sport called Raider Challenge, which is a part of ROTC, or junior ROTC.
Mm-hmm.
And as an 8th grader, I was allowed to play with the high schoolers and do the events. It was very similar to what we would call today Best Ranger competition. It's just a diluted, more sport version. And there was the leader of that JROTC, his name was Colonel Phil Baker. He was retired. He's a former Vietnam-era Ranger and I think Black Hawk pilot, which was something that you never see actually anymore. But he was one of the first Rangers that were allowed to go to aviation school and whatnot. And there was a period of my life where I left home at 13 or 14, and I tried to emancipate myself. And so on the tail end of that, when I was back established with school, Colonel Baker talked to me about attending college, and at the time I didn't have any intention to go to college. I think I was working for the city, cutting grass, or working at Pep Boys by that time. And in a nutshell, he introduced me to the concept of an ROTC scholarship, and every excuse I had to not go to a military college, he kind of knocked out of the window.
I'm just curious what he did, if you can remember back.
Yeah, I remember when he said,
an example.
"Hey, why don't you go to college?" I said, "Hey, I don't have the money to go to college. You know, I just left home on my own, and now live with my sister, and we're just making ends meet." And he said, "Well, how about if you went on an ROTC scholarship?" And, then I'd say, "Well, I don't want to go all the way up to West Point or somewhere too far away." And he'd say, "What about North Georgia Military College? It's only 50 minutes away." And I'd respond with something dumb like, I don't want to go to all boys military college. And he'd say, hey, it's 70% female. Or something of that nature. So every excuse I had, he just eliminated for me. And I was involved with Boy Scouts, and I had good grades. So an ROTC scholarship, he kind of introduced me to that being tangible, possible. And that's when I first thought about maybe going into the military. Before that, it was to enlist in the Marine Corps maybe crossed my mind, because they always had the best commercials. Every Marine I ever knew was just so convicted about their purpose. But this was the first time somebody sat down with me, and I was an Army officer, and poured into me like mentorship-wise for years. And he sat here and worked with me through these obstacles simply because he saw a potential I didn't see.
Was he a teacher? I mean, how did you see, how often, what was your contact with him?
I'd see him probably most mornings, because I participated in the program called Raider Challenge, and then deliberately in the classroom once a week with JROTC training, where you come and wear the uniform and whatnot. And there was also Colonel Steward, my last year at Decatur, that was another mentor, playing the same role. So they were like the senior, I don't know what they would call them, JROTC instructor. And there would be about 2 or 3 for every program, each school that had one. And I think that was the first time I wanted to go military. And at the time, so I was raised to dislike my father. My mother influenced me to not like him. And so when I left home, I got to know him fairly quickly for about 3 years. And one of the things that was very apparent was he was not at all fond of the military. And so I remember going and applying for this ROTC scholarship and eventually getting it, and having so much trepidation to go talk to him about it. And I remembered in that moment how he never let himself get disgruntled when I told my father. I could see it in his eyes where he was just not happy that the military had his child, you know what I mean, or would have his child, but then completely enthralled. And I had a chance to go to school, and become an officer and whatnot. It was a pretty beautiful moment.
I was just going to say, it sounds like a validating
yeah, it was
moment
very validating.
To have
very
that
validating.
happen.
But he was not, my father's African American, and he did not have the greatest time in uniform, and especially coming out of uniform, coming back to the South, trying to get employment, as a Vietnam veteran and as an African American male. So he swallowed all of that when I told him, I'm going to the ROTC route through college and become an Army officer. And it was a beautiful moment.
Yeah, that sounds like a great moment. I'm sure he's proud of you. Or?
Yeah, he passed away right when I graduated high school. But it gave me the conviction to go on to North Georgia and represent his name.
All the more reason to go on. That's great. And then your mentor that saw something in you,
Colonel Baker and
Colonel Baker, sounds like, So what point did you realize they were right, or he was right, Colonel Baker?
Colonel Baker was kind of in that coach level of mentorship. I gained another mentor who's then an investigator for the city of Decatur Police Department, and he eventually became the chief of police. And I would take my report cards by to him, and we would interact because the city of Decatur is not that big, and I fell up under his wing. And that's a lot of our interaction were validating of Colonel Baker's words and whatnot, because there was always the fear of the guy in uniform is always trying to get someone in uniform, but to have someone else see some of the same values in me, Chief Booker, is pretty validating.
So you, at the time when you were going through this, were you pretty receptive, or were you sort of a rebellious kid?
I think I knew everything at 14 because I left home. I mean, I was my own man, if you will. And it was very humbling to try to figure out life. 15, 16, 17, and my sister was just the greatest supporter I could ever have, taking me in. But I think I definitely wasn't I joke around with friends that are in the military. If I would have went to basic training to become an enlisted soldier, I think I would have had a bad career trajectory, because by 18, to have a 19-year-old tell me what to do, or to go through the drill sergeant basic training experience, I think it would have been abrasive for me. But going the college route, in my head, since I had worked so much, it was an employer paying for my school, and that relationship made a lot more sense for me of why to do things.
Kept in line a little bit.
Right, to get the grades, why to get this or that. And college, military college, was the first meritocracy I think I've ever seen, where the amount of effort you put forth correlates with reward. Everyone gets a fair shot, so you get 2 minutes to do as many push-ups, regardless of creed, color, whatever. If you do more push-ups than the other, you would have a higher score. And this was my first environment like that, where I felt like I got a fair
So how did you do?
shot. Did well. Over the 4 years, I made a lot of friends. I learned the principle of keeping people around you that you aspire to be like, and what that can do for you. At the end of 4 years, I was ranked #1 in the nation out of about 5,000 cadets, I think. And that for me was the first foot race I've ever won. Never won a wrestling tournament before that or anything to that degree of whatsoever. And when I look back, the people that I looked up to were #4, #14, and #19 in the nation at the same time. Or, you know what I mean? It was a very weird outcome, but I was very humbled.
But you did it.
Yeah.
So get me into when you did go into when you started the service. Where did you go, and what year was it?
So I signed an ROTC scholarship contract 17, so that's when the hooks were in, right? But you don't actually serve until you commission. I was lucky enough before commissioning to be able to go to schools like Airborne School and Mountain Warfare School and active duty training environments without actually being on active duty. And I also got to take a trip to St. Petersburg, Russia on an Olmsted scholarship, which was a very eye-opening experience.
What exactly was that?
It was a scholarship, I think I applied for. It's through the Army. The Army has a 2-year program called the Olmsted Scholarship, but this was a study abroad college level permutation of it. And I was allowed to go to the Southern Polytechnic University in St. Petersburg, Russia, and study for, I think, 4 or 5 weeks. And it was a low stress environment academically, so it was maybe 2 classes a week, and the rest was cultural immersion and getting to see another way of the world, which was pivotal before deployments, right? Going to see somewhere outside our borders.
Was that your first time outside the United States?
Yeah, that was my first time outside the United States.
Okay.
So that was definitely
Wow.
eye-opening, right? And then, to go see who, in the ether, the Russians are painted this certain way, and then they go meet these people and see they're human just like us, and they get around things a little differently. But just to see an older civilization, something that's not 200-something years old, something that's thousands of years old.
That's pretty unique. That was fun.
Yeah, it was definitely fun. But I commissioned, I think, May 2009, and my first job was to be a recruiter for Georgia Tech and their ROTC department, because I needed to get on, I remember wanting to get on active duty orders as soon as possible. So since I left home at 14, I was still technically a ward of the state. So that meant state insurance and whatnot. And so my goal was to get on orders. Well, the Army wasn't ready to start my infantry training until July, or maybe it was September. So I just wanted to do something, and I got to get down into Atlanta and be a recruiter, basically serve as a model to the cadets of what you look like as a finished product after 4 years of training, if you will, and to help get the word out and
Mhm.
try to find new aspiring cadets across Atlanta to go to Georgia Tech or Kennesaw State University in a similar manner. After that, went to Fort Benning it was called Bullock 2 at the time. It was basic officer training for all different types of branches, and it was about 18 weeks. And after that, went to Infantry Officer Basic Course, which is about 12 to 13 weeks back then, where you learn how to maneuver mass effects with our weapon systems. Learn first how to be an infantryman, just one individual with a weapon, and work with all your equipment, and then how to work amongst a team of 3 to 5 and 12, eventually on how to run a team of 44 individuals. And I think from there I also did mechanized infantry course, where you learn to work with Bradleys, and then went to Ranger School, which is a leadership course that can be anywhere from 9 weeks to almost a year long, depending on how many times you recycle. All of that took place while I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, near Columbus, and then right after Ranger School, I remember going to Fort Steward. I was originally in 130th Infantry Battalion, trained with them for maybe 2 weeks, and then joined their sister battalion, 164 Armor, and jumped right into Iraq, Mosul, Iraq area for our first deployment. They were already deployed, so that was pretty daunting to meet your people that you're supposed to lead halfway through their deployment. What do you have to add to that problem set, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So were you taken to it really well as far as when you got up to that point going to Iraq? I mean, did you feel in the system, or were you questioning, is this what I...
Yeah, there was no feeling ready. There was moments of humility that I remember clearer than all others. I remember sitting in, I forget where we flew through to get to Iraq, but it's a holding, where was it? Somewhere with Kuwait, maybe. I can't remember where we flew through to get there. And I remember meeting a guy named Tommy Glasgow, who was a sniper, and he was coming to the same battalion. And so he was about my age, and I felt like he might be a new guy coming on the first deployment. I remember swapping music with him and asking him the question, hey, so is this your first time as well? And he's like, no, buddy. And he started unbuttoning his shirt and pulled it down. He's like, I was shot like 8 weeks ago. And I'm coming back now to join my sniper team. And I remember, okay, this is real then. And I remember the dive down into Baghdad when you first are flying on a C-130 or whatnot. You fly at a certain altitude, but to land in Baghdad, they do a combat dive, and it's like the worst roller coaster, the most abrasive kind of roller coaster drop you could have. And I remember, just never feeling prepared up until the actual moment of getting to my platoon. That's when I stopped asking, was I prepared? But up until that last line, it's a question. You keep asking over and over and over when you get there.
Were there people that you knew that you were with, other than the sniper that you met?
I knew of people who I might have went to Ranger School that also went to their units in the area. But in my immediate 800-person group, no, I don't remember knowing anyone before I got there. No, not at all. But I knew I trusted, especially the NCO Corps that we had there. That's something that was ingrained in me from North Georgia days, and from my time at Bullock and whatnot, how to spot good leadership.
Do you remember their names?
Oh
Anybody's
yeah, Sergeant Arthur. I remember a series of events of getting to getting to my company headquarters and for about a week not really being gainfully employed, you know, doing kind of minuscule tasks or whatnot. And I remember having my first counseling session, and the guy who gave me the counseling was pretty confident. And he gave me 3 rules to always look cool, always know what I was doing, and if I can't follow rule number 2, go back to rule number 1. And so I remember thinking to myself, is that really, I was starting to write it down, is that the rules? And I remember getting to my platoon after that and feeling like a prank was kind of being pulled on me, because the platoon sergeant, the lead NCO in charge, was on leave. And so I'm coming out to what was then called Checkpoint 10, which was the furthest point away from Mosul and our headquarters. So it was going to be 2 hours away from any American that was able to come get you by truck from our main headquarters. And I think my sister platoon was maybe an hour and some change to the east. And so I'm going out to receive, or to join this team, and the person who would know everything is on leave. And so I remember the platoon leader who I was replacing not really knowing where everything was, and they effectively had 3 or 4 trucks, 3 trucks surrounding a perimeter that was a square, and that in my head with all the training didn't fit. But he was saying, hey, no, this is how we've been doing it, this is what we're going to do. And I remember him handing me some equipment that was ragtagged, but it was like his backup equipment in case anything got lost. He's like, here's for you. And my spidey senses are going off. I didn't feel like this is really right or what we're supposed to be doing. And I remember about a week or 2 later, the platoon sergeant coming back, Sergeant First Class Arthur. And to this day, it's probably the best platoon sergeant I ever had. Got everything back in order. We were able to get the property situation handled. I had all the tactical training I could have, so I knew a triangle can't really secure a square, and I knew how to get in those micro-arguments with people and get the job fixed. But when it comes to the glue that holds the team together, that allows the men to kind of relax and it's going to be taken care of, you need that platoon sergeant to have the continuity. And it was so nice to get him back. And once we had him back, I mean, he was the best person to manipulate a Bradley across terrain that I've ever met. And he also had just an innate ability to find people's skills that aren't on their uniform and then put them to use. So we were out there with not much when it came to amenities. So Iraq evolved from south to north, and although we were there in 2010, I think we were on primitive kind of primitive conditions because it just hadn't evolved. So he was able to find, a specialist so-and-so who was a carpenter, and specialist this that was able to do this, and Sergeant Arthur was able to weld, actually. And so we were able to construct things out there because getting the Corps of Engineers or getting someone to come out and build us something was few and far between.
How long were you out there?
In Iraq, totally, I think 7 months, 6 months. For me, they were out there a whole year. And that little triangle security perimeter we had around a square of gravel eventually became an established, checkpoint where our responsibility was to secure, or as a battle space owner, if you will, for about 40 square kilometers, which was about 31 villages. And it had been so long since anyone had been there that our job was effectively to do reconnaissance and find out what what are the conditions around this area. So the maps we had were in Russian still, because it's the last time someone had been out that way. When people would approach us, they would think we were the Russians because they hadn't seen a civilization coming like us with the weaponry that we had since the Russians. And I remember my key terrain was the Mosul Dam, which was the dam that if it fell, then Baghdad would flood. It was always an area of consternation, I guess. Mm-hmm. And our job We were along the Kurdish border. Our job was checkpoint 10 all the way over to checkpoint 1 to help with the partnership between Iraqi and Kurdish army, Iraqi police, Iraqi army, and the Kurdish army, so that when we were to pull out, that they would have camaraderie and have team building already amongst them and trust to keep the mission going forward.
How did that work out?
I mean, we all saw the news when we
Mhm.
eventually got out of Iraq.
Mhm.
I think the relationships we made on the micro level helped a lot. I don't know about the macro. You know, I didn't have that perspective. But I know when we first started, if we left a Kurdish and an Iraqi in the back of a Bradley without anyone watching, they would always get in a fight. And then by the time we were leaving, they were eating on their own without us, and we were being invited, you know, and that was on our little football field of space, you know what I mean? We'd always have about 20 Iraqi and 15 Peshmerga. Peshmerga are the Kurdish army. And, you know, it seemed to be making forward progress. Toward the end of that deployment, we would have a few blue and greens, though, that would undermine a lot of the progress.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you had contact with families and people there, but if you had that.
No, we weren't able to have not their families or ours. But when a blue and green would happen, meaning either Iraqi or Peshmerga, I don't remember any Peshmerga blue and greens, but would turn their weapons toward each other or toward us and fire and take life, that would make us have to increase our security protocols, which after I've spent this much time building trust with you to then say, hey, you can't carry a weapon on our little football field, that would always bring some consternation, but kept our American interests protected to the extent that we could.
During this time, did you communicate with your sister or your family back in the States?
Yeah, I remember
Or
that
did she
deployment.
communicate with you?
We didn't. Iraq, I had a lot less communication capability than Afghanistan. And I remember at a certain point being able to get a satellite phone out to my guys, and that was probably on every couple week basis, or maybe once a month, I can't remember. But be able to allow everyone to kind of circulate that phone and get a word out. And then if we went into Mosul, the bigger bases, then we'd always try to do a deliberate stop and let guys go by the MWR, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Center to make a phone call or whatnot, or the USO sometimes. So that I wish we had more communication at that deployment, but that wasn't that much.
Yeah.
No. It's a double-edged sword, though, because when you can isolate the team to focus on one purpose, you have a certain level of focus as a group. But when you start being able to communicate with the outside world on a regular basis, now you have the gossip of the neighborhood or the family constantly seeping through to your people. Yeah, with the morale. And not everybody wants to talk about it, so you can't always identify what's going on. But when bad news happens, it's immediately affecting someone when in a position where they can't do anything about it. It can be really tough sometimes. But lo and behold, I say, all things being equal, it's better to have communication.
Yeah.
It's just to have it in doses.
You made it through that, though. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
So where did you go from there?
Iraq, we came home 2010, end of 2010, and had our mandatory kind of R&R period of time. And back then you had this 3-year R4Gen cycle, and I remember the R4Gen cycle is basically you come back from a deployment, you train for a year, you practice for a year, and then you deploy for a year. It's kind of the 3-step process. And so we were at the end in 2011 of our first year back, and we were scheduled to go to the National Training Center by May of 2012, I think. We were closing down shop winter time of 2011. We were about to go on block leave, and I remember a private saying, "Hey, sir, we heard we're going to deploy soon, and we were like, no, buddy, we have another year before any of that. Get ready for Christmas leave. And then the boss, the battalion commander, comes out and says, hey, so we're going to deploy. And the whole formation is just looking really shocked. And so our May 2012 NTC rotation got shifted to February or January 2012. And we were on it was a very fast turnaround. In the conventional Army, we call it a no-notice deployment. And I remember the first quarter of 2012 just trying to get out to Afghanistan in one piece. Because we would go from 1,200 soldiers are going to go down to 700 soldiers, up to 800 soldiers. And those are lives in which people are being affected, whether or not they're going to be gone. And it's a tough cookie. It was a tough one. And right before... I just remember the logistics of trying to move that many people and that much equipment on short notice. It was tough. It's very tough. But we eventually had people landing in Afghanistan, I think, by the end of February, maybe March. And that was vicinity Kandahar, Afghanistan. So that was my second deployment. So that time I think I felt ready, right? And I had a few more courses between me and my first deployment. One being a Joint Fires Observer course, which allowed me to communicate with fast-moving jets that have larger ordnance to help us while we're in contact on the ground. And that was probably the single thing that made me feel good. Going to Afghanistan, because we knew we weren't going to be able to take our Bradleys, or the tankers weren't going to be able to take their tanks. And so that was kind of the big blanket in the sky I could have if we did need help, to be able to talk to them. Even if you don't go to the course, so you're still able to talk to them, but going to the course allows you to take what would be a 15-minute conversation and chop it down to 3 to 5 minutes to get some help when you need it.
When did you get out of there?
What do you get out of there?
Well, when did you get out of there?
Oh, that was just a 2-week course that I had prior to deploying to Afghanistan. So I think that was like the end of 2011 I was able to go to that course. They actually sent a team of people to Fort Stewart to train.
Okay.
And that deployment, I was a scout platoon leader, so I was a reconnaissance for the battalion commander. I was kind of one of his specialty platoons. So he'd have us and a mortar platoon, and us meant about 40, maybe 35 cavalry scouts and 15 infantry snipers. And so it was a larger platoon than normal. My first platoon was just 35 to 40 infantry riflemen. And so this is kind of the second rodeo, if you will. I felt more experienced and worked for a bigger boss, so I had a bigger view of the battlefield and how I was supposed to help. Basically serve as the eyes and the ears so he could make the decisions, which meant we were the first out and the last to leave and whatnot.
Did you form a lot of relationships there?
Yeah, I definitely formed a lot of relationships there. Because I'd been in the battalion for now the second deployment. That Tommy Glasgow guy went from just a sniper that I met to my sniper section sergeant, and eventually he served as my acting platoon sergeant during the deployment for a period of time. But no, I got to know a lot of people then, or have a lot more meaningful relationships.
Have you stayed in touch with any of them?
I have. So the trip that I'm on right now, the Appalachian Trail trip,
Well, let me do a little pause to set it up, because we will continue. This is when you get back, I want you to explain where you are now, because how it came that we're able to be meeting here at the Library of Congress.
Yeah.
Tell what you're doing, because it seems like it is directly related to where we got up, what we've been talking about with your service, and it's important, and preparation, everything. So if you wouldn't explain what you're doing right now and how it ties with some of the buddies, people that you met.
Yeah.
If you could just highlight that part and how it relates, why there, and why you end up here.
Yeah, so I'm currently here taking an administrative break from hiking the Appalachian Trail. Hiking the Appalachian Trail, part of a project called Something Out of Nothing, which is a project of a nonprofit. The project Something Out of Nothing is designed to make organized noise, raise awareness when it comes to veteran mental health, and ideally raise support for the families left behind or the veterans at high risk. And your initial question was, did I keep in touch with some of the buddies that I was forming meaningful relationships with back in Afghanistan days? And yes. So the team that I have right now, multiple people that I were on deployments with or training with around that time served this project. So
Can
this,
you give a few names?
yeah, Tommy Glasgow.
Yeah,
I already hit him
so
twice.
the Tommy
Yeah.
Glasgow, he's now involved in
He's now
this.
involved with this
okay.
project, and a gentleman named Justin Miller.
Uh-huh.
Justin Miller was my platoon sergeant in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And I got a few other buddies from military days that weren't on those deployments, one being Jason Pomeroy. He was a classmate of mine when I went through infantry officer basic course, and he was also a trainer with me when I taught at the infantry officer basic course. So I did those 2 deployments I spoke about, and then taught at the infantry officer basic course for about 4 cycles. Jason was a sister platoon trainer at the time. But back to Something Out of Nothing, this is a project that aspires to emulate a veteran's transition. We've seen tremendous amount of lives being lost due to mental health, and think that by raising enough awareness will help veterans connect to something through the wintertime. Will help people in the community connect to the concept and to veterans within their network. And ideally, during the walk and while the walk's over, or once the walk is over, raise funds to be able to help the problem set. There's a lot of nonprofits out there that are helping veteran suicide, or just helping veterans, and we believe with a little bit more anecdotal subject matter expertise, like actual veterans doing the choosing of the entities who receive money, who are enabled, will have a little bit more forward progress. Case in point, there's about 40 to 50,000 veteran nonprofits, and a goal of ours is to raise resources and place them in trust so that when money is donated and handed to a veteran organization, that veteran organization is joined to the trust document and has to execute what it is that they're pledging to do. Also, if a veteran family needs support, it's not a one-off check shows up in the mail. We hope to have a nonprofit trustee interfacing with that veteran family, helping to educate and make sure that their spending is thrifty and whatnot necessary. But yeah, we put this project together starting from June of 2021, and we started walking the Appalachian Trail on September 11th. And it was a concept that, just like the name, was something out of nothing. My goal is to make a walk at some extent so every veteran knows it's okay to ask for help. The childhood I had a judge involved with my case that became a mentor that eventually took his life. And then I also had a very important military mentor lose his life, or take his own life. And so suicide has always been something that I've dealt with from a teenage age range until putting on the uniform. And then once I put on the uniform, I think it was 2013 that the statistic came out that 22 veterans a day were taking their life. And that was a Veteran Affairs statistic that came out. And that was the first time, you know, a face was given to the name, if you will. You knew that people were being lost in the military, but at that rate, it was so staggering. And so me as an individual always saw that number, always did our push-ups to kind of support, but this is the way I thought that we could support is by walking 2,200 miles during the wintertime to highlight the isolation that a lot of veterans are feeling, the silent sufferers out there, and a lot of entities that are doing great things. A gentleman named Greg C. Washington walked 1,800 miles from Mount Bayou, Louisiana to West Point, finishing on September 11th of this year. And so we started on September 11th going southbound. And the goal hopefully is to get just more attention and point out heroes like Kenneth Kuhn, who runs the Armed Forces mission. He's got thousands of suicide interactions, if you will, engagements that are successful, and he's down in the North Georgia area arming people with the first aid of what to do if you see somebody with a face and don't know what to do, how to connect with them, what questions to ask, who to get them to or toward for help.
And who's he training? Who's he sharing that with?
He shares that with veteran entities, first responders, schools, businesses, anyone that helps him as a nonprofit, or hires him as a nonprofit to come. But there's just too many people who are doing great things, and this project hopes to highlight them as we walk down. A great way we've heard the suicide problem set explained is veterans are experiencing complex grief at a higher rate than most, and complex grief can be thought of as a triangle of isolation, financial stress, and toxic relationships. And whether when you look behind the consequence of suicide, it's a byproduct of, did they have 100% weight on one of those three apexes? Was it 33% on all? And we hope as a project to breach through the apex of isolation. Albeit I'm doing something that's self-isolating by walking down a trail in the wintertime, we hope that people are able to reach through and connect to that instead of isolating through the holidays.
Were these, I'm just curious if there were, did you have thoughts about this when you were in Iraq or Afghanistan, when you were out, when you were deployed, or is this something that totally came together afterwards, or did you see things in your men? Because you said you had some experience. Is there something that could be done? I guess I'm thinking about that too, before, preparation to train somebody when they get out to cope or catch it earlier. I guess that's...
Yeah, I think not in this fashion. I didn't. I had aspiration to hike the Appalachian Trail growing up. We do a lot of training in the area or whatnot with Boy Scouts and with military. Aspiration to connect in this way. No, I was going through a period of hardship last year, and I've been introduced to the concept of getting into nature for so long to help rehabilitate things that are not symmetrical problems, that are not just logical problems that are going on. I went to a Quaker school for 2 to 3 years when I was a young child, and mindfulness and meditation and getting in nature were not foreign concepts to me. And so through this summer, processing my own stress and figuring out how to get through it, I saw this walk as beneficial for me as an individual, cathartic and whatnot, but more so to demonstrate to my peers that are now in civilian attire or still in uniform or whatnot, that they can do this too. They can go out and ask for help and yell out to teammates. Just let someone know you're needing help, and people are more than likely to help you. That's, I think, what was unique to myself. Coming from the background I did, I don't want to say never, it's been a while since I've had issue with asking someone for help. Life humbled me a long time ago to know I was not going to make it on my own.
That's a good thought.
Yeah.
So you've been on the trail for quite a while. You started in September, so now we're December 1st. So just can you give a few highlights? How have you felt on the trail? I mean, how's it helped you in
Certainly.
ways maybe you hadn't even expected?
The people I'm able to interact with on the trail have been meaningful, memorable. The dwindling of interaction, though. So as I'm going south and it's getting colder, I'm having less and less interaction. And that's been getting heavy, and it's trying to stay in the moment and not think about what's going on the back or the front end of this. We generally reach back and get depressed, or reach forward and get anxious, and sometimes just staying present is the day's goal. And that has been very humbling for me, let alone so walking at the clip we're walking, for the distance we're walking. Trying to run the project at the same time as walking has been tough. And like making sure things get on the media outlets, or people get contacted, or opportunities like this can work. And so I've been just blessed with the people who are helping me to achieve that goal. And we were able to, I've named out the military folks, but there's also non-military people on the team, and it looks like a big old rainbow on my team. And it's so beautiful to have their help.
Well, we're sitting here together because of somebody, Rosie Schultz, just while I'm working in REI, and we just get into conversation because she's not a member, and I say I interview veterans, and she said, you got to meet this guy. So, you know, the circle's gotten really bigger, but like I said, we're trying to what to help you is, you know, supporting veterans is so important. But I think people like to know, are you doing okay on the trail?
Yeah,
are you
I'm doing all right.
Physical? Can you handle
I am.
the challenges?
Speaking of Rosie Schultz, I mean, I have support. She's my healing touch therapist, and as on the preparation aspect this summer, a lot of my preparation was not walking related. It was more so looking at all the ailments I've got and how to mitigate risk of it getting worse, and work on spiritual healing and just planning, route planning. And Rosie worked on me probably once a week this summer doing healing touch, and she has a very interesting background. She's 4 years, I think, as an Army nurse or Air Force nurse, and then did nursing in general for the next 45 years.
With the VA, she worked with the VA.
Healing,
so she's a veteran too. I'll get her.
She did healing touch for 17 years, and just looking at something like that and how healing touch isn't a modality that is in the Western kind of VA model until now. It's becoming, there's I think it's called the Sergeant Hannon Act that's starting was passed in 2019. It's going to allow other modalities, a chiropractor, acupuncture, and I think healing touch as well, to be accessible by a veteran, to get word like Rosie Schultz out, so that other people can benefit. I mean, she's been able to do her work remote, and it's... that's it. So you're coming up, because you said how many organizations are involved with mental health and right now? Or just in veteran in general, I think it's over 40,000. But so you feel by the veterans, you all have something to bring to the table that's different to do it better? Yeah, just in identifying what are effective ways and sharing the word, because there's a lot of approaches that are taken and kind of broadcasted, but there's a lot that aren't, and trying to to let veterans pick who's helping them the most, we think is a new way of looking at it, as opposed to the big government agencies. Have you met any veterans that are also on the AT? A lot. I was given an anecdotal statistic from someone on the trail that about 2/3 of every male she met was military at some point in their life. So the 1/3 that wasn't was either graduating college or recently retired. But the 2/3 that were all military-age males that are walking off some stress. And a little nugget that I found in the beginning was Earl Schaefer is accredited as the first thru hiker. And Earl Schaefer was a World War II veteran walking off the Battle of Iwo Jima and losing a friend of his.
Mm.
And so to find out something like that while walking and sharing it amongst just people who are stationed or living along the trail, it gives them a feeling of, you know, that's home territory. I'm always welcome there. And yeah, there's been a lot of veterans and just people in general who might be suffering that get out there and find what they need on the trail.
So you're interacting. You have some people coming out and meeting you.
Yep.
They're civilians.
We've
in the
had
tent.
we've had people come out, and everything from my Uncle Terry, who's was a World War II veteran, all the way down to active serving people now of the Pennsylvania National Guard or active duty Army who are able to make time and come out and walk. And we just wanted to serve as everyone's opportunity to walk, whether or not they're with us at home in spirit or whenever they have time to do it. It's always at their display, or you know, at their fingertips to go hop in nature. You know.
So you're kind of needing people more now as you get into this winter.
Yeah.
A little more support.
Mm-hmm. That would. Yeah, it's definitely going to get a little bit more solitude once we keep getting colder and colder. There's day hikers from time to time, but not many through hikers.
Yeah. Well, not everybody can do the through hike.
Right.
You know, but it sounds like it's good to just sort of get out there. I think I'm real curious. I know you got to get back on the trail. Where exactly are you right now?
Right now we have a logistics site near Fort Valley Ranch, or I think is what it's called, campground, which is in the Shenandoah Mountain Range.
Mm-hmm.
So we pass Harper's Ferry. My time is off in my head. I think end of last week. But we started the Shenandoah officially. I think I started in the national park yesterday and finished around Thornton Gap. Tomorrow I'll start at Thornton Gap and do a day or two movement to what's called Swift Run Gap, and then another day or two to get out of the Shenandoahs, which is it's gorgeous. It's a beautiful area of Virginia. The nearby towns are Front Royale and Luray, and I think at the end of the Shenandoah, the nearest town will be Waynesboro, Virginia. Yeah.
So what's kind of where you are now, from where you began from the hike? How are you feeling right now about everything and the whole mission, and also because of you wanting to help other veterans that are listening to what you're doing?
Yeah, I've been blown away with the amount of individual veterans that are reaching out, or family of veterans that they may have lost or they've been worried or whatnot, and how this is helping at the anecdotal level. I think that the project could perform better on the fundraiser side. I think any nonprofit fundraiser is probably saying that at this point.
Yeah.
I know I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling fragile. You know.
I want to know how you are.
Yeah, cold and wet.
We're talking here.
Right now I'm warm, and theoretically it's 60 degrees outside, right?
Well, was a special trip with the Veterans History Project and personally being here.
Yeah, very cool.
How's that helping your morale?
Oh, it's definitely cool. And we got Carrie Ward's wonderful tour earlier today.
Yeah, that's a big plus.
Yeah, personal tour of the Library of Congress. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, you're here.
But yeah, just blessed to be able to keep going. So every time I get in a low point, I remember why I'm doing it and who I'm doing it for. And that gives me enough resolve to keep stepping. It's a population that everyone's going through something these years during the pandemic, or just period. But then, you know, the withdrawal of Afghanistan happens, and that's something that hits in a different way to the veteran group, or just the constant state of emergency we're in, or how we define it, hits the veteran group differently. They've been trained to suffer in silence, you know, just keep it moving and keep it going. But they need heartfelt connection so that people can identify toxic relationships and financial stress. But a lot of times veterans self-isolate, or they isolate, you know, because they have to keep focusing on that mission. And we're purpose to just try to get through that, make a crack in that so some light can come through.
Have you had any just a conversation with an older veteran that knows what you're doing? You know, somebody that's maybe says, "Wish I had done that." You know, because when we interview older Vietnam veterans, for example, that are talking now that never did. But I'm wondering, have you had any conversations or reactions from older veterans?
Not during the time of
doing?
this project, but I've had those conversations in passing with older veterans that, hey, you know, a lot of them were still in that mindset of tough it out. But the ones that spoke to me most were the ones that say, I wish I spoke sooner.
Okay.
And I think the best senior veteran I had experience on the trail was my uncle, who's 78, coming out and doing a few miles with me, and that was great and phenomenal just to watch him get after it and
that's great.
give you life goals.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. I mean, it's a important cause what you're doing, but also your service, your whole story, and the fact that being able to speak out, to say it's okay to ask for help from a badass Army Ranger is inspiring. So I know you have to get back out there. Do you have any questions? Do you have something you'd want to add? Because we're going to do a continuation when you get at the end of all this. I know let you rest and everything, but because kind of went fast through some of your service. But is there anything you want to ask or leave with?
I just ask if people do have someone in their community to check on them. That's with a military background. Make it awkward. You know, look them in the eyes and ask, how are you doing? You know, and wait around for the explanation instead of just going back to what you're doing. If we could just make people feel comfortable to ask for help, I think we get ahead of the problem. And you know, have an idea of where to point them if you're not the subject matter expert on that.
And then who was the person you said that's doing all the training that is down in he's now in Georgia?
Kenneth Kuhn, Kenneth Lou Kuhn. He runs the Armed Forces mission out of North Georgia.
Because that'll be helpful. Because a lot of times civilians are afraid to ask. They don't know what to say. They don't want to bring it up. So your message is important, and to learn how to bring up the topic, because I hear that from civilians. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out to be here. And it was Justin.
Yeah.
Which was Justin's last name.
Miller.
I'm mentioning Justin Miller because he helped get you here today.
Yeah.
He's in the background, but it's pretty important. And like I said, this is going to be part of the Library of Congress for hundreds of years from now. So it'll be it's important. It's important, and I'm sure it's been important way before. It's just somebody needs to step up like what you're doing, to take the time to stop whatever life's happening, and this mission, doing the trail. But like you said, getting outdoors, they don't have to do the trail. They can walk out, just get away and go to the woods.
Touch a tree, get some
just touch
sunshine.
a tree. Exactly. It sounds like a great message from you. So I really appreciate it. I think we're going to wrap it up for right now.
Okay.
I want to wish you personally well for the rest of the trip. Stay safe.
Thank you.
And strong, and just know there's a big circle growing.
Thank
Support
you.
growing around you.
Thank you very much.
I hope to see you. I'm not sure where I'm going to get, but I'm going to hopefully through maybe Rick. You met him, Rick Harding, that helped you. So I know some people are trying to plan coming up to see you. So there's some plans going in the way. So thank you so much. We'll wrap it up, and thanks to Carrie Ward for bringing us all together here.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, thank you.